to start the recording. So I'd like to thank all of you so much for being here. We are a small but mighty group that is interested in learning more and making Little Compton a more welcoming and inclusive place. My name is Jenna Magnuski. I use she, her pronouns. I am the co-president of Love Wins Little Compton, along with my constant partner in so-called good trouble, Megan Gonzalez. Also with us are Raul Iriakere-Dimbor, who is our vice president, Megan Wardell, co-secretary, and Amy Lotz, who is our treasurer, and not with us tonight is our other co-secretary, Hyla Bauer. Love Wins Little Compton was born from this LGBTQ plus coordinating committee. It was organized by Kari Starr of the Little Compton Wellness Center and Doug Orville, the now former executive director of the Little Compton Community Center. We decided to have a coming out party for the group in early June. We were really concerned that nobody was going to come. And in the end, 200 people came, including many speakers and dignitaries like our Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos. From there, we've been propelled forward by the enthusiasm that we've received within the community and actually just became an independent 501c3 nonprofit organization. I'd like to extend a special thank you to the Little Compton schools. They provided copies of Once a Girl, Always a Boy to anybody who wanted to participate in the book club. Megan Gonzalez and I first read this book as part of their intercultural book club in the school and found it an absolutely wonderful read that we had to bring to the community at large. Tonight's presentation is going to be about 30 minutes, followed by a Q&A portion. During the presentation, I'm going to mute you just to avoid background noise, but you will be able to unmute yourself. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask without being identified or have your image be on camera, you can send them to me in the chat window throughout the presentation. We'd like to create a brave space where everyone feels comfortable and is ready to learn. If we do see or hear any kind of hateful speech or behavior at Joe and Jeremy's direction, we will remove that person from the meeting and follow up with them at a later time. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge that we here in Little Compton are on the ancestral homelands of the Sakonnet people. Megan Gonzalez and Megan Wardell are joining from Pittsburgh, which was the ancestral homelands of the Osage and Shawnee peoples. Joe and Jeremy are signing in from the ancestral lands of 5 different tribes. And because I am not familiar with the area and those particular tribes, I don't want to mispronounce their names. But you can look up the local indigenous communities for anywhere on the globe. If you visit a website, native-land.ca, and you can type in what your area is known as now, and it will show you the territories and languages that are used there. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the virtual mic on to Jeremy Ivester.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy, and I am transgender. I'm guessing everyone here is familiar with the terminology, but I'm gonna go over it anyways. A transgender person is someone whose gender identity does not align with their sex assigned at birth. So in my case, I was assigned female at birth and have since transitioned both socially and medically to male. I'm here along with my mom, Jo, to share some of my story, as well as talking about the process of writing the book, which is my whole family's story surrounding my transition process. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little about why we do this. And for me, it's pretty simple. I do this to raise awareness. And I think that's important for a few reasons. One, for people like me going through something similar, having role models to look to know that what they're feeling is valid and that they have a future in a community, I think that's vital. I think people need that kind of support. Raising awareness is also important to combat those who use trans lives as a way to spread fear and hatred, because it's very easy to dehumanize and hate what you don't understand. So I hope that by sharing my story, I can show people just how human I am, that we're just people and therefore deserving of love and respect and the opportunity to succeed in this world, or even just to exist. So I guess now it's time to actually start telling some stories, and I'm gonna let my mom take over. So everyone, this is Joe.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for caring about, well, everything that Jeremy was just talking about. I know most of you have read our book, and so I don't want to just repeat what's in the book, but we thought what we would do this evening is share some of the stories, but with a little bit of a twist, where we um, give you some background as to why we thought those were important to include in the book. And we're basically going to go through some highlights of Jeremy's life. And that part of why I start is because we're going back to when he was a real little kid. And I remember that really well, and him not so much. So people sometimes ask us as parents, so my husband John and me, um, did we know when Jeremy was a little kid? And the answer is no, we didn't. And what happened is that John and I had an approach to parenting that was very accepting of uh, gender openness, of not sticking to what our society has way too often declared male and female. Um, we grew up, we're children of the 60s, and we grew up during the women's liberation movement. And I was really right on the transition where my family talked the talk of liberation, but my role models basically suggested that little girls could grow up to be teachers, which was wonderful, school librarians, which was wonderful, and moms, which was wonderful. But if you wanted to be the police officer, the firefighter, the soldier, a physical kind of job with hero worship, we didn't use those terms. You were a fireman and a policeman and an army man, and little girls weren't supposed to do that. So we were convinced as parents that it was important to make everything available to our kids. And that meant not just the role models for careers, but also the way we dressed. You can see my hair is really short. And so I didn't view that as boyish. That was just the way I liked my hair. So by the time Jeremy came along, he had an older brother and an older sister. And we offered Jeremy all of their hand-me-down clothes and their hand-me-down toys. And Jeremy very consistently picked those hand-me-downs that were from his big brother that our society thinks of as boyish. And we weren't presenting them as boyish, but that's what Jeremy picked. And talking bluntly about it, I'm aware of all these pitfalls because I don't want to be pushing the stereotypes of little boys like trucks and little girls like dolls, because it was the opposite that we were aiming for, was to not have those stereotypes. But Jeremy fell into every one of those stereotypes, and we just said, he's a tomboy. And I had been what our society called a tomboy. So I kept saying, well, Jeremy's like me, except I wasn't using the name Jeremy. And that actually got in our way, in my way in particular, as a parent, because I kept assuming that Jeremy was like me. and I was wrong. Jeremy was Jeremy. And it made it harder for me to begin to understand, because when my husband would say, something's going on, are we, should we be concerned about Jeremy's happiness? And if you've read the book, you'll see that there were a lot of clues that Jeremy wasn't quite feeling okay in his skin. I was going, yeah, he's fine. He's just like me. And if we had known then what we know today, if we'd been able to see in toddler Jeremy what we know today, we could have provided better support. We could have given him the childhood and teen years that he deserves, that he deserved. And that's part of why we share, is so that other families won't, I won't say screw up, because we gave Jeremy a pretty darn good environment, but we'll just be able to provide that much more. And that's important. And that's really behind the writing of the book. I've spent a lot of time on that out of our half hour of speaking, but it's a really important idea that if I were to say what's my biggest regret as a parent, it's that we didn't know. When Jeremy was 4 years old and was sending out signals that none of us recognized, it was an opportunity lost. So what were the signals? Well, I'm getting back into society's stereotypes. Jeremy, all his friends were little boys. Now, we didn't think much about that because that's who was in our neighborhood. It just, we had 20 kids in 2 cul-de-sacs. And of those 20, there were 4 or 5 kids that were Jeremy's age who just happened to all be little boys. And that's who Jeremy played with. Again, that just was who was there. It didn't occur to us, Jeremy's feeling more comfortable with a group of little guy friends. Then all these little guy friends wanted to get their hair cut at this new place in town that had video games, it had cartoons on, it was really focused on kids, and it was really focused on little boys. And so we took Jeremy there, and they didn't know how to cut long hair. For those of you who have read the book, you'll recognize this experience. Jeremy got not a very good haircut. His hair was down around his shoulders, and the stylist, who was this very nice person, didn't know how to trim longer hair. And it was uneven, it was kind of scraggly, lumpy, and I said to Jeremy, I'll fix it when we get home. And I don't know whether it was my inexperience with the scissors or whether seeing Jeremy's face in the mirror, smiling bigger and bigger, I'm not sure what it was, but I just kept on cutting. And when I was finished, he had a haircut that we would think of as a traditional little boy's haircut, where it was very similar to what he's got now, parted on the side, and the ears totally visible, and just short. And he was so happy. He was beaming. And I was happy, and I didn't know why. But there was something for me that I knew I'd helped my kid appear the way he wanted to appear. It didn't really strike me completely until the next day, though. And that was, he went to daycare. He was in preschool, and his friends, picking up on society signals, were going, wait, are you a boy or a girl? Because for a 4-year-old, long hair said girl, short hair said boy. And Jeremy told us about this when he came home. And I said, well, what did you say? And he told me he hadn't answered. Well, that was a huge signal that I had no idea how to interpret. But if I had known then what I know now, I would have realized that he was enjoying having people see his gender as something other than a little girl. And I could have responded. Instead, it was just it was interesting information. But I didn't do anything about it. Well, in those early years, elementary school, were actually really happy for Jeremy. He had this group of friends. He wore his hair short when he wanted it short. He wore boyish clothes when he wanted boyish clothes. He played on sports teams with all the little boys, and everything was working great. And then the rest of the world kind of caught up a little bit with what Jeremy was going through. And somewhere toward the end of elementary school, uh, he'd been invited to a sleepover with all the kids from his flag football team. And it turns out that the mom who was hosting wasn't comfortable with Jeremy's presence there and said, your kid's getting too old, and I'm using the word your kid to avoid saying pronouns, but your kid's getting too old to spend the night with the boys. So pick your kid up at 11 o'clock. This mom was so well intentioned, was hosting all these kids, but essentially that was the start of Jeremy not being accepted by his social peers. And life got pretty lonely for him after that. So now I'm gonna turn the virtual mic back to Jeremy to talk a little bit about middle school.
Yeah, middle school, I'd say, was kind of the first time I was really confronted with my own gender. First time it was really affecting my life. And it was a difficult time for me, unsurprisingly. Difficult socially, because like my mom was saying, up until then, I had a pretty good social life. I had a whole group of little guy friends, and we do everything together. But then middle school hit, and it seemed like overnight, they no longer knew how to interact with me. That suddenly being a tomboy just wasn't an okay thing to be. And my friend group disappeared. And I was very socially isolated. And for me, I didn't understand why, because in my mind, I hadn't changed, everybody else did. And so that was tough. And middle school was also very tough because that's, at least for me, was when puberty started. And puberty was not a good time. I have very distinct memories of sixth grade PE, having a coach approach me after class to say, hey, you can't wear t-shirts without a sports bra anymore. And I was crushed. And at the time, I don't think I could have explained why, but now I feel like back then I knew that I was a girl, but I never connected that to growing into a woman. And so this was the first time I was really confronted with my gender, and I wasn't okay with it. I was very upset. Sorry, my cat is now meowing in the background. My body was changing, and there was nothing I could do about it. Excuse me. And it's not what I wanted. But I didn't tell anybody because I didn't have the language. We didn't have the terminology to explain what was going through my head. So instead, I did what I could to fit the role I thought I was supposed to fit, and I did not fit it very well. I was very uncomfortable in my skin throughout my teenagehood. Yeah, I was generally a very happy kid, a very optimistic kid, but very uncomfortable in my own skin. And it wasn't until college that that I even learned that transgender was a thing that you could be. And then it took a few years of a lot of self-reflection and therapy before I kind of came to terms with everything and went forward on my own journey. I think my mom had something to add to that as well.
Sure. So during college, that's a time when 18-year-olds get to reinvent themselves the way they want to be. It's this incredible time in people's lives. And for Jeremy, what he said is, I love everything about college except the classes. So he loved being away. He loved the friendships he was making. He loved being in band. The classes, not so much. And we were okay with that. That didn't surprise us. And Jeremy started wearing his hair much shorter in general, and um, he used a nickname, M, which was kind of just the one letter, which reflected his childhood name a little bit, but was androgynous. And that was the way he described himself, was androgynous. And none of us knew what it meant to be transgender at that point. But Jeremy started dropping little bits of information for us that he was learning about what it meant to be seeking. And eventually he told us that he had gender dysphoria, and we were able to look up the medical term. And he shared with his dad and me that he was going to have top surgery. And I will let you know that my first reaction was to be terrified by this. I'd not heard of it before. I didn't like the idea of my kid having major surgery, and I didn't understand that it was medically considered a best practice. And we started doing research and realizing that Jeremy knew exactly what he was talking about. And at the same time, it was so new to the family that his siblings didn't know. And what's going on in parallel is his big sister's getting married and had asked him to be her maid of honor. And he had said yes, because that's what sisters do when you're really close. And Jeremy felt honored to have been asked and wanting to be a part of things and loving his big sister. And the thought of wearing the maid of honor's dress that had been picked out was horrifying. And we were saying, you got to tell your siblings what's going on, that you're looking at having surgery and that you can't wear this dress. And Jeremy's, I'm not ready. I don't want to take away from the wedding. I don't know what to do. And it was really hard for me as a parent because I could tell Jeremy was hurting. And I could anticipate that if he would share with his siblings what was going on, that although there might not be understanding, there would be love and acceptance. But it had to be Jeremy's path, and he had to decide when he was going to say something. And so, not very long before the wedding, he approached his big sister and said, I can't wear the dress. But Jeremy had already come up with an alternative. He said, how about if I wear the same slacks as all the men in the wedding party, and a white dress shirt, a man's white dress shirt, and a vest that will match the same color as what the bridesmaids are wearing. And his big sister, without understanding what was going on, without knowing that surgery was not just anticipated, but in the process of getting scheduled, she said yes. And so for his big sister's wedding, Jeremy stood by her side and had the title maid of honor, but looked like this charming young man with his short hair and his slacks. And everyone said he was really cute. No one had any problem. In retrospect, Jeremy has said cute was not the word he was going for. It was handsome, but he'll put up with mom saying he was cute because he just knows I'm very taken with him and very proud of him. So some of the mom pride is coming through right now. But the acceptance from our community was pretty cool. No one said anything harsh about it. Well, fast forward 3 months, and his big brother was getting married. And his big brother's fiance, now my daughter-in-law, had asked Jeremy to be one of the bridesmaids, and Jeremy had said yes. And so the two brides are on the phone with each other saying, well, here's what happened. You're going to have to figure something out as well. So what my son and his fiance decided to do was invite Jeremy to just wear the same clothes as the men and stand with the men. Over the course of 3 months, that's how much acceptance grew. And that's what Jeremy did. He still hadn't changed his names. He still hadn't changed his pronouns. He still hadn't acknowledged that he's transgender, even to himself, just that he had surgery scheduled. This was acceptance. I am just overflowing with pride in my kids, in Jeremy's older siblings, at the way they accepted him. So at that point, Jeremy was saying, surgery is all I need. But it kind of wasn't. And it wasn't very long after that that Jeremy said, I'm going to head back into counseling. I got to deal with this gender dysphoria. It's more than just my physical appearance. And he went ahead and started, I guess, weekly sessions again. And you want to talk for a minute, Jeremy, about where that led you and your decision to announce?
Yeah. So I had been in and out of therapy for pretty much all of my adult life at that point, specifically because of my gender dysphoria, and am a huge fan of therapy in general and how helpful it is. And leading up to surgery, I think I knew that getting top surgery wasn't going to be enough, but I had convinced myself that if I changed my body to match my brain a little better, then I'd be fine, and I wouldn't have to disrupt anybody else's lives. They wouldn't have to change the way they thought about me. I could just be me, but with a flat chest, and everything would be good. And I definitely knew that I was lying to myself. But it didn't all click until after I'd had surgery and strangers started seeing me as male. And the first time that I was consistently called sir and assumed, and people had assumed that I was a teenage boy, even though at the time I would have been 23. The first time that started happening, it was hugely affirming. And I felt like, oh, that makes sense. And it was very soon after that I made the decision to start hormones and announce to everybody that I am changing my name and my pronouns and going to be going through male puberty. And I announced it on Facebook. Well, first I told all my friends and family, and got just an amazing response that no one was surprised. Everyone was supportive. And it really shows just how much of a difference it makes when you have a strong support system, because I was so scared going into it that I knew everyone loved me, but I didn't know if people would accept what I was doing. And unanimously, they did. I had a huge amount of support, and in a lot of ways, it made my transition very easy. That there was a lot that I had to go through. There was inner turmoil, but ultimately, my transition was a really joyful experience of me getting to be my true self and everyone else getting to see that. And it's been wonderful. And now it's what, 8 years later, 9 years later, and I've never been more comfortable in my own skin, and that's amazing. I think my mom wanted to talk a little bit about the big Facebook announcement, because that was really what got her started on advocacy, which eventually led to writing this book.
So thank you, Jeremy. The Facebook announcement, Jeremy says he told all of us. He did write a letter to all his siblings, but he thought he had told his dad and me, but he hadn't. And we knew that it was a possibility, but it's not like we knew on this date, Jeremy's going to make an announcement. And by the way, this is the name he's going to start using. Uh, when he had his top surgery, I went and stayed at a hotel with him for a week and took care of him. And during that week, one of the topics of conversation had been Jeremy saying, well, this is as far as I'm going to take it. He was still in quite a bit of denial. But if I ever do go further and take on a new name, what should it be? So we had spent a week playing with names, and I knew that Jeremy was one that had appealed to him, but I didn't know that that was the name he was going to take until his Facebook announcement came out. And um, it was really cool as mom to have gotten to pick his name twice. Not that I picked it the second time, but I did suggest it. And it just made me feel like I really was on this journey with my son, which was an amazing feeling. So his Facebook announcement came out, and I had been bursting to share with the extended family and with friends what was going on in our lives because this was a huge thing, and I was so excited for Jeremy, but it wasn't my story to tell, so I had stayed absolutely silent about it. Well, once Jeremy made an announcement, that freed me up to say something, and so I posted on Facebook as well. And by this time, I was already a writer. My first book was out, and so I was thinking in terms of having an impact, wanting to make people really feel touched by whatever I said. And so I took time to really wordsmith it, which I know Jeremy had done for his announcement. But basically, what I said was to tell the my Facebook community that I was really happy to announce that we now have three sons. And so Jeremy has a younger brother too. So we have three sons. And I shared what Jeremy had posted and then talked about how brave he is and how much courage he has, and that we had been with him every step of the way and would continue by his side wherever his journey takes him. And I still feel that way. Well, I didn't expect it, but the posting went viral, and we started hearing from Facebook friends of friends of friends just writing a response. And at first, it was all very positive stuff with people somewhere in the LGBTQ community saying thank you for being an accepting mom, and this means a lot. And I'm kind of patting myself on the back, saying, okay, I'm a good mom here, and that felt great. But then some of the letters were darker, and they were from young transgender men who saw themselves in Jeremy and shared with me that when they came out to their families, they'd been kicked out. 15, 16 years old, living on the street. And I I was heartbroken over that. And I tried to write back to everybody that wrote to me, basically saying, um, here's just one more adult in your life that cares about you, and tried to correspond as much as I could without being invasive. But it made me think I had to do something. And that's when my husband and I started researching it. And that's when we found out that over 40% of transgender teenagers have tried to die by suicide. And not just thought about it, but actually tried. And that was, well, still gets me choked up. We learned that over 40% of our homeless youth are homeless because they are somewhere within the LGBTQ community and have been kicked out by their families. And as we realized that this is what our world is like, I thought I need to, as a writer, use my talents, use the platform that I've created as a speaker, and share Jeremy's story if he's okay with it. So I asked him, and at first he said, "What, you're going to write about me? What would you write?" And I told him, and within moments he said yes. He saw the power of storytelling as a way to help people expand their comfort zone, and that trans kids of the future won't go through the denial and the years of not knowing who they are if more people will share their story. So not only did he give me permission for me to write, but then he helped me with the book. He shared his video journal with me, and he read every word multiple times to make sure that it was accurate and that I was really capturing his voice in the book. And the whole family jumped in. For those of you who have read it, you'll see that it's not just Jeremy's perspective and my perspective, but all of the family members, and everybody jumped in. And what happened is some walls came down that folks didn't even know were there. So comments that had been made by siblings, for example, that hadn't been intended to hurt, but they felt hurtful to Jeremy. And by writing about it and trying to explore that, it got all siblings talking with each other. So this has been a remarkable journey. And then coming out of it, it gave us a platform to go speak. And Jeremy and I have been doing this now for, I think, 6 years, where we share his story. And in the book, there are the first few years of that happening and a couple of stories, but I will share one that really has touched me and is one of my favorites. And it was one, Jeremy actually wasn't with us. John and I had gone to an out-of-town event. This is pre-pandemic. And it was a mixed event where during the day we were speaking to the entire student body, sharing stories. And then this was a day that had been organized by the students, and they'd invited me to be a speaker. And then there were small group gatherings of students, and they could pick their topics. And we had about a dozen students that came and sat in a conference room with John and me, and we just kind of shared. And in the evening, it was an opportunity for parents to come and hear. Well, one of the students that shared after the group meeting came up to us one-on-one, or one-on-two, since John was there as well, and told us that they were non-binary and was trying to figure out how to share this information with their father. And we said, well, bring him to this library gathering tonight, and you don't have to say anything about why you want him there. Just, you heard a speaker today and thought that Dad might appreciate coming to the school and hearing. Well, during the course of the talk, the two were texting each other, and the kid came out to their dad. Right there, sitting in the library as we shared stories. And afterwards, I had the opportunity to talk both with the student, who was upset and in tears, but also feeling relieved. And I made sure the student was with the school counselors, who were providing tremendous support. And the dad was off on his own, just staring out the window. And I walked over to him, and he turned to me and he said, I already knew. I was just waiting for them to say something, and it's going to be okay. Because of our advocacy work, we had an opportunity to be a part of this incredible family story. And it just reminded me, and every time I think of it, it reminds me over and over again, how important it is to share our stories, for Jeremy to be a role model. And it is evenings like tonight that keep us going, because this is exhausting work, especially when it gets real political, which it does. And then we get to be a part of a community gathering, and we know such good things are happening, and it re-energizes us, and we're ready to go back and fight the political battle. But on that note, I want to turn it back to Jeremy for some closing comments, because we want to allow time for Q&A. But before he closes, I just want to say thank you. Jeremy?
So like I mentioned at the start of this, what we're really trying to do is to help raise awareness there is lots of things going on right now in our country politically that are actively trying to make it so people like me can't exist. And by sharing my story, I hope to show that we're here and we're real and we matter. So thank you guys for being here and listening and being part of this. I think we're now gonna go ahead and open up the questions. I'll hand it off to Jenna because I don't know if you are how this is going down. So I'll let you take over.
So since we are a relatively small group, I'm going to make it so that everybody is kind of equal on the screen. So you all should not be seeing spotlighted folks anymore. And if you have a question, I was thinking that we would use raise hand just, to kind of establish speaking order, which is under reactions now. It doesn't have its own button. So if you have a question or a comment that you'd like to share with Jeremy and Jo, you can go ahead and do that. And I will step back and wait to kind of see what you all have to share.
As you're thinking of your questions, I will encourage you to just blurt stuff out. Don't worry about if the way you word a question is politically correct or using the most current accepted terminology. We know that the questions are coming tonight from a place of really caring and a desire to learn, and you can ask anything. We may not answer it. Jeremy might say that's not something I'm willing to share, but you don't need to worry about policing your own language. If you say something that we think could be worded slightly differently for the future discussions, we'll let you know, and we'll do that gently and knowing that you're coming from a very positive place. So please feel very free to jump in with questions.
Okay, so we have Hyla and then Raul and then Megan.
Hi, my name's Hyla, and I'm a proud parent of two teenagers who are both in the LGBTQ+ community. My younger child was born as female gender and now uses they, them pronouns. And I felt like I was gonna cry because it's just so wonderful to hear your story, Jeremy and Jo, how supportive you've been. And I've learned so much, but it's really, I can identify with how difficult it is because it can be really brutal. And having a mom like yours, and I'm trying to be that mom myself, it's just great. And I just really loved the book, and I admire your strength, and I don't know, having a little bit of a fangirl moment right now, but thank you very much.
Thank you for being the accepting mom that it sounds like you are. So that just means so much for your kids.
Yeah, and for me.
I guess, Raul, you were up next.
Good evening, everyone. I guess I just want to share a reaction that triggered something in me. I identify as a gay man, as a homosexual man, but my journey in another generation, the generation of the 80s, I was born in 85, and growing up in South America, in Colombia specifically, as a kid, I didn't know what gay was or homosexual. I knew the word homosexual, and it represented a lot of negative things. And my visibility of the maricas, that was the word that it was used, the faggots in Colombia, was not very positive. So I remember when I was a very young kid trying to figure it out what was going on with me, and everything that I thought I was and then was feminine and attractive to was very bad, very negative, and so I was just very, I didn't have the internet, didn't have any positive visibility. So it resonated with me, and it's something very important to know that this is why we're here. This is why we created things, because this is why I run a GSA Top Club at the schools, and this is why I'm so out. So kids can know in that age that you have role models, and there's gay people, and it's normal. And for me, when I was growing up, that was not like, it was a very bad thing to be gay, and I didn't knew there was no other information available to me around it, but just negative stuff. So it resonated with me, and I wanted to share that. And that's why we do this. This is why we're visible. And thank you, everyone.
I'm sorry that you had a rough time as a kid and a teenager, but I am thrilled that you have turned that into running the GSAs for the schools. So that's so important. And one statistic, I'm sure you know this, Raul, but to share with others who might not be aware. So the suicide ideation is an important thing to think about for trans kids and LGBTQ kids in general. And just one adult in their life that is supporting and that understands can absolutely make the difference. They've done some research on this, and just having Raul organizing the GSA is saving lives. So thank you.
Is it my turn? Hi, Joe and Jeremy. Thank you guys so much for doing this. And thank you, Raul, for inviting me to this event. I actually met Raul as a teacher across his hallway, and we hit it off really well. And I kind of voluntarily and unofficially joined the GSA he was running at Fairhaven High School as the female teacher across the hall, very cisgender, but an ally since I was in high school. I've always loved the GSA, even in my own high school. And I might be getting close to the opportunity to run the GSA in the new high school that I'm a part of in Duxbury High School. They already have a GSA, it's already established, but they need a new advisor. So I'm hoping that they'll pick me for that. I just wanted to know a little bit more from Jeremy's experience, because I haven't actually had the privilege of reading the book. I have seen the title out there before Raul invited me. I thought it was a really great coincidence that I was really interested in the title, and then he invited me to your event. So I wanted to know, even before I read the book, what Jeremy's experiences were with teachers, the support system he may have had in school, or, besides that gym teacher experience. Was there a GSA? Oh, what year were you in high school? I'm just really curious about overall how after middle school, once you were in high school, what at least like the teacher side of your support system may have been.
Sure. I graduated in 08, graduated high school in 08. I didn't start my transition until I was in my early 20s. So high school, I think I was very oblivious to the options that I had. And also, even then, was in denial, because at that point I was presenting basically as masculinely as I could without really committing. So even as a high schooler, while most kids my age had grown out of the tomboy phase, I very much had not. And so I think there was a lot of assumptions made about me and my sexuality because of that. And I was just completely oblivious to it. So if there were GSAs and things available, I didn't know about it. I was in my own head. And I, in high school, really didn't have a social life. And so I focused on other things. I had a lot of hobbies that I really put my all into. In college, one of the freeing things about college was it's just so big that you're not worried about really seeing these people again, you know? So my first kind of experimentation with using different pronouns and different names was actually in class in college, where it was a language class where they had us, you know, standing up and introducing ourselves, and would split the class between the boys and the girls, which in hindsight is silly, but I guess makes sense for languages that you have to learn the different gendered things. But that was my first time kind of experimenting publicly with my gender, and just being in that environment, in a very understanding environment. So I went to school in Colorado, Boulder, Colorado, and no one batted an eye at someone experimenting with their gender presentation. It was just kind of the done thing. And that was hugely freeing and really pushed me to figure out what was going on with me. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't have anything from high school related to the teachers, just because I was so oblivious to it all, unfortunately.
So it was more oblivious than it was purposely or on your part or on their part isolating you? You just kind of found yourself in like a no man's land of identity?
I think so. Yeah, that I didn't realize that other kids were doing other things. I didn't know, you know, other kids went to parties and hung out with each other outside of school, because I wasn't doing that. So yeah, it was right over my head.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I'm so glad that you're out and you're so comfortable with yourself now. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's neat. One thing to just jump onto Jeremy's response, he mentioned in his situation, in his experience, he just presented as a tomboy, and that was kind of accepted, and people didn't really pressure him to be different. It's a lot tougher on kids who are gender non-conforming, non-binary, or who are trans feminine, because our society doesn't accept that as easily. And so our stories tonight have very much focused on what it's been like for Jeremy. It's very personal as a transmasculine individual. But being transgender, there's no one right way. And there's the it's kind of an umbrella term. And in some ways, Jeremy had one of the easier paths to go down. And we also have come from a place of privilege. I appreciate that, Jenna, in the introduction, you talked about being on the land of the local indigenous folks. For us, it's the Tonkawa tribe here in the Austin area. But we recognize Jeremy's journey was much easier because as a family, we never had to worry about putting food on the table. We had a place to live all the time. The basics of existence were never an issue. And that just made everything a whole lot easier. And if you take a kid who is food insecure and throw on top of that they're dealing with gender dysphoria, it's just tougher.
I believe, I can't see if anyone else has their hand raised, but I know that Kari Starr had a question.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh,
Okay, that's better. I'm sorry. I missed first 30 minutes, Jeremy and Jo, and I'm really bummed about that. So I'll be watching the recording. I was having technical trouble here. I have to just compliment you on your book. When I became aware of it, I actually sent it to everybody I know. And when I tell you that, I mean my email contacts, my family contacts, my work contacts. I went to the school, I got 7 copies. I dropped them off for the police, for everybody in our community. And I just kept saying, you have to read this book. You just have to read this book. And people would say, why? And I'm like, because you just have to read it. It was just enlightening as a straight woman. Growing up, didn't have any GSA, any support, grew up a tomboy. I was 6'1" at 16 and I weighed 120. And boys didn't really appreciate it when I could beat them in basketball. And I didn't have any girls to play with. And so my family was great because I didn't care if we had, you know, friends that were Black, white, Asian, Indian, Mormon. I just grew up knowing everything was okay. So my question though is and again, I apologize, I missed the beginning. What do you suggest someone do if you suspect that you have a loved one that might be sort of unsure about themselves? They might be unsure about their path. And I'm specifically thinking about a young teenager. You know, they clam up pretty quick. I'm sort of sitting back in the wings waiting for a nephew to sort of make the first move. And I think, I know I will love him, whatever he decides he's going to, how he will express himself. But do I wait, or is there something that you would suggest is a nice opener?
I mean, I think all you can really do is let it be known that you are a safe person. That confronting him in any way kind of might have the opposite effect. So just making sure in whatever ways you can that he's aware that you are here for him and you support him no matter what. And then if he does choose to talk to you, that you will listen and you'll believe him. Because that's the biggest fear, I think, for a lot of teenagers coming to terms with themselves, is that people won't believe them and will tell them, no, you're wrong. And that would just shut them down. So it's really just being open is all you can do, and being there for them.
And there are ways to signal that. So like if you look at the bookshelf behind me, it's not real clear, but there are some flags that are the pink and blue transgender flag and the rainbow flag that are just there as part of my decor in my home. And if you go to our front yard, there's a sign that says "Pride lives here," and it's got a rainbow on it. At times, we'll have a flag out that could be lots of different things. It could be school flags from our kids, but there's a trans flag and a rainbow flag, and it just is sending a signal. Or by our choice of T-shirts that we wear, it sends a signal that here's someone who's accepting and open, and people respond. I was kind of stunned Halloween a couple of years ago when it got to be after dark and the kids were no longer the 5 and 6 year olds in costume, but the 14 and 15 year olds who were just wanting to hang out with their friends and get some candy. They're coming up to our door, still trick-or-treating, and I would say at least 4 of them thanked us specifically for having flags that were visible through our front window. And they didn't say anything more than thank you, but had they needed to, they could have. So having a bumper sticker on our car that is an equality symbol. I've had people wave to me that I don't think they were waving to the 64-year-old. They were waving to the car that had an equality sticker on it. And it's just it's a easy way of showing that you're supportive. For a teacher, because I know some of you are teachers, you can have something up on the bulletin board. You can have an article. You can have books in the classroom. Even elementary school age, there's wonderful books that are now available that are picture books with trans main characters. And so those are all ways that you can show your a nephew or niece or anyone else in your life that you're a supporting person.
Thank you.
And sometimes just a smile.
Thank you.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment about the book, and just the whole time I was reading it, all I could think about was how supportive you and your husband were. And, it's very inspiring and motivating, me to, act that way. And I just thought that your book was such a good place to start for so many people who don't know anything about LGBTQ, transgender. It's an easy read, and you can really feel that every single one of the family members. And yeah, so I just, again, want to thank you for sharing your story. It meant a lot to me, and I know my friends who read it as well. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that. That's our goal. So hearing that just makes me feel good.
I think Jenna was next.
Jo, I was curious. I doubt that Jeremy probably remembers enough of this point in his life to be able to speak to it, but definitely jump in. If you have a child in your life that you feel like is kind of sending you some of those signals, now knowing what you know, what kind of response would you have had? What would you recommend to other people with these children in their lives that might be
I think
doing that?
it would come down to three things. And the first is what we've been talking about so far, of just sending the signal that we're accepting and supportive and okay with this. And that goes a long way. But then I would also check in with my kid's doctor. And the medical community is getting better and better trained. If my kid's doctor was not experienced with patients who are exploring gender, and was unwilling to learn about it, I would change doctors. I would find someone who is going to be supportive, because the medical community has essentially a toolbox for helping to figure out where a kid is. So there are signals that we've talked about that you could see in a kid, that maybe the kid is like me and just a really pretty extreme tomboy. And maybe the kid is like Jeremy and shares some of those attributes, but is transgender. And it's sometimes hard to figure that out. Well, doctors have a toolbox for asking the questions. And it may be that you need a counselor, that the doctor would say, okay, here's a social worker or a therapist that I want your kid to spend some time with, so that we can figure this out. If your kid is older, in the pre-puberty years, maybe an endocrinologist would be coming into the picture to be looking at puberty blockers, so that a kid doesn't go through the wrong puberty. So the second piece of it is looking for the medical profession to be supportive, and getting a team together before you need it. And then the third is the school. That if the school is not very actively gender affirming, I would see what I could do to change that, or even change schools, because the teachers should have the literature available. The librarians are a tremendous advocate and source of information. A kid should be able to walk into the school library and see books about kids like them. That's super important for whatever it is about the kid. So I would take that three-pronged approach of making sure that the adults in the kid's life are aware and supportive. And the fourth step is, at some point, I think it's okay to be having a direct conversation with a kid, to just say, does it, I noticed that, and to say some example. Do you feel more comfortable when you get to have your hair really short? Why do you think that is? And to just start an open conversation. I think that is very possible. And as long as you're not taking the lead away from the kid and still following the kid's lead, I think it's something that we as parents can do is to encourage them to explore.
Great, thank you so much. Hyla.
I just wanted to share something else that I've experienced as the mother of a non-binary child, teenager now. A lot of people have said to me like, oh, you know, it's so trendy now and everybody's saying that, you know, this or that. And it makes me really mad when people say that, because it's not trendy and it's not something that you just decide one day like, okay, this is what I'm going to be because it's like cool or whatever, you know. And I still struggle like with how to say to people like I say like it's really serious. It's not like a trend or like a fly by night thing that people just kind of go in and out of or whatever. But yeah, I'm still struggling with how to respond to those people. I mean, my child, you know, it's gone through so much. Like this is not they're not faking. Like this is not just like, oh, this is who I want to be this week. Like it's just, you know. Anyway, just wanted to say that. And then my child has also said like, you know, with Native Americans and other tribal groups, they've had like shamans and other spiritual leaders who they said had both genders in their body. I forget what they were called, but they were like
Two-spirit.
Two-spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love that because, I mean, obviously it's not just something of our time right now. This has been ever since humans were humans, you know, clearly. So anyway, thank you again. It's so wonderful what both of you have done.
A couple of thoughts on that. First, just to say thank you. I'm again just so appreciative of the mom that you are. This is great to hear about. The response that says, "Hey, this is hard for kids. They're not going to pretend that this isn't trendy," I think is a great explanation. I would say that if you are in a situation where your kid, you know, 6, 7 years old says, "No, I'm a boy," say a kid that you thought was a girl, and then a year later says, "Actually, I feel more comfortable presenting as a girl," that's okay too, and that even if the kid is exploring and is moving down a path that they end up saying that isn't their path, that at the end of it, all you've shown your kid is that you're going to love and accept them regardless of who they are, and that's okay too. We can throw all kinds of statistics at people about how folks don't tend to do that. That when a kid says they're trans, it's real.
Yeah.
But logic doesn't necessarily work in convincing people, and to say, I need to be a supportive mom, regardless of where this ends up, that that may help. I mean, just
Yeah.
another thought.
Yeah. Thanks.
We're getting that a lot in Texas right now, where they're trying to define it as child abuse for a parent to be supportive of a child's gender. And the reason it's come up is because it's part of custody battles, where one parent says, my kid is trans, another parent said, no, my kid isn't trans. And so for custody purposes, each parent is saying the other one is being abusive. And that's made political front page, and our governor tweeting out about it, and the state social services getting involved, and it's been extremely difficult. And the courts have stood by the parent who has said, my kid is trans. But in the meantime, while that battle has gotten fought, this poor kid has been on the news and on the front page of papers and been outed without having consented, and outed by the very politicians who were saying, oh, this is such a private matter. It's just been really, really hard. And the very issue that you talk about keeps coming up with the politicians saying parents are damaging their kids when they're accepting because this isn't real.
Yeah.
No. We gotta love and support our kids. Let's keep coming back to the kids and what's good for them. And support and love is what's good for them. I don't mean to sound preachy. I'm sorry if I do.
You're preaching to the choir here, so.
Oh, no. Other thoughts or questions? I know we're over the, Jeremy and I will stay for as long as there are questions, but I don't want anyone to feel guilty if they're saying, oh, I need to go and do something else. I appreciate all the time that folks have already spent.
It's like Janice has her hand raised.
Sure. I'm not sure if I'm okay. I want to thank Megan Gonzalez for finding this book. And I'm very thankful to be part of this tonight. I think meeting an author and hearing the story and reading the story, I think it just helps tremendously with education. I mean, certainly this theme of love and acceptance is a really crucial one for trying to make the world a better place. When I first picked up the book, it's not the first book I've read, and it's not the first author I've now heard their story. But with this one, just on a personal note, I just knew everything was going to be okay. And so I could really relax and read it and dig pretty deep. Some other journeys have, for people, have been really hard because of the approval and the acceptance. And I'm a librarian and was lucky enough to go to a lot of the American Library Association conferences where they would have, authors there that you could listen to. And one was a really powerful speaker. And at the end, she said that she almost didn't make it because she had tried to commit suicide just 2 months prior. So I just want to be on the team of love and acceptance and really make the world a better place for people. So I give you a lot of credit. Your book was amazing. And I would certainly have it in any library I was at. And I've already recommended it. And I can't really dig deeper than that to praise you for it, because that's that's as good as it gets for me, I guess. But thank you. Thank you for tonight.
Thank you. And thanks for your work. As I said earlier, librarians are my heroes. I think you're incredibly important in the kids' lives. So thank you. Other comments or questions?
Hi, Miss Megan.
He's been dying over here waiting to say hello.
Hi, sweetie. Hi, Ollie. It's lovely seeing your face.
So, Janice, did you have something else, or was your hand just up from before? Okay. So I just want to say thank you again to Jo and Jeremy. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us and humoring us as I'm being used like a juggling gym. I appreciate so much the power of your story and just, the fact that, we sent you a message and said, hey, we think it would be great if you could come talk to us, and how quickly and enthusiastically you responded was just great. And so thank you for being the advocates that the both of you are.
Well, thanks for inviting us. And I don't know if you have your chat lines open, but I just put my email address in the chat. I welcome follow-up questions. I will try to answer everything quickly, and just anything we can do to be helpful. That's really what we're trying to do now. And so tonight is just a tremendous opportunity for us. Thank you so much to the whole team for including us and for being here and for your support. And like I said earlier, I feel energized and ready to go tackle our advocacy goals and make a difference. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming tonight. Please be safe. I don't know if Jo and Jeremy are aware of this. We are here in Rhode Island, we are solidly within the crosshairs of Hurricane Henri, which is supposed to hit sometime in the middle of the night or early tomorrow morning. So we are grateful that we scheduled for today, not tomorrow, because we all probably would not have had electricity.
Good luck tonight, and I hope you've all got adequate food and water in your supplies. And I lived in Boston for many years, so we had our fair share of storms, but
We might have actually saw the start of the storm.
Ooh.
okay.
All
well,
right.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Good night. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.